for instance, there's no point in me going into Neil Mulholland's before Taunton because I'm going up to turn around and go back again. But Neil's on the way to most places, so it's quite straightforward to jump into, and same with my brother. But so I'll be riding out, depending on where the first race is and where I'm racing, then I try and get away so that I get to the races an hour before the first race or my first ride. And generally, where I live on the edge of Exmoor, so my local courses would be Exeter and Taunton. Exeter's 40 minutes away, Taunton would be 45 minutes away. So generally, I'm spending 6 hours in the car because most of the race courses, even the sort of you call the local ones, Chepstow's 2 hours away, Cheltenham's just over 2 hours away. So you're generally, I'm spending at least 3 hours trying to get somewhere and 3 hours trying to get back. But sometimes, fortunately, the journeys home are a little bit quicker than the journeys there if you've had a good day.
You've mentioned talking about riding for several different trainers and obviously a diverse bunch of owners. Do you ever get sort of conflicts in terms of who to ride for and clashes and things like that? Is that all dealt with by your agent, or do you sort of have to play a bit of politics?
Yeah, you do get conflicts if you're riding for a lot of different people, but you try and take the Lester Piggott approach of riding the best one you can. It is difficult at times, and you can't you can keep most of the people happy most of the time, but you can't keep all the people happy all of the time. So when things are going well, people want you to ride your horses, and it's very great, and you're very, very grateful. And then there's other times they don't want you. So I've been in the sport long enough to realise that today's sort of up and coming man or whoever is popular at the time, it's winners that count. And if you keep going on the mantra that you ride the best horse possible you can, then the rest follows.
We've set this podcast up to try and promote ownership, and one thing I noticed, and part of the reason for asking you to come and join us is I always think you're very good with large groups of owners, sort of including everybody, speaking to the whole group. But obviously, like sort of Simon sort of said earlier on, you've been around quite a while and you've probably seen that kind of ownership, shared ownership increase. Do you think that's sort of good for racing? And is it different dealing with large owner groups as opposed to individual owners?
From a jockey's point of view, I think it's probably trickier for a trainer with the large groups. I know from experience with whether it's with David or my brother or Neil, from a trainer's point of view, when you've got lots of people involved, everybody wants your time. And if you're training 100 horses, it's very hard to do that. So from a trainer's point of view, you want the sort of spokesman to speak to, and then they can filter it through. From a jockey's point of view, you want as many people involved as possible, because more people involved in racing means that the more popular sport it becomes, and revenues increase, and the rest follows. So you hope that people, you just want people to have the same passions and enjoyment out of the sport that you get personally. And I think that with syndicates, and it's great to see so many of them, and they're becoming more and more popular, and rightly so. That it's great to see, and from a jockey's point of view, it doesn't matter whether they've got a leg in a horse, or a hair in a horse, or 60 race horses, or a string of 60 of them. They're all, you've got to give everybody the same amount of time and feedback, and it's important to treat everybody the same in any walk of life. If you're a shopkeeper, you've got to try and treat everybody the same. You can't, whether a good customer or a bad customer, you've got to look after everybody, and that's the sort of my mantra.
Sure. Well, I think you do. I think you do a good job with that. I certainly know from my owners groups they enjoy having you riding for them. But obviously you haven't done a lot of dealing with owners recently, because we've had the whole COVID situation and less owners on the tracks. I think Simon wants to ask you a few questions about that, don't you?
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. We were great to get racing back in June. Obviously, not too many racegoers until recently have been able to go, and not too many owners. But one of the questions I was being asked really was, for a jockey, now you've had a couple of big wins recently, haven't you, on Cloth Cap and, if I pronounce it correctly, Ramses de Tillet. What's it like for you as a jockey having those big wins without the crowds being there? It probably doesn't necessarily affect how you're going to ride the horse, but is it left a little bit of a void, Tom?
Not really. I mean, look, obviously you want people to go and watch it, and especially from the race courses point of view, it's a different. It's more so at the smaller tracks actually that you go there, and obviously you want people to go there because of the revenues, and it keeps the lifeblood of the sport going. But if I'm honest, when I won on Newbury the other day, or at Cheltenham, at those moments it doesn't really hit you that there's nobody there, because you sort of get used to it. Where it really does hit you, and especially more so at Cheltenham, is when you arrive, when you're going in. So I'm sure you're all very familiar with getting into Cheltenham. Normally it takes ages to get in, but there's that build up of the atmosphere. And I went past the Centaur the first time I went for the October meeting. The Centaur was completely empty. You're just driving past that, and normally there'd be probably 10,000 people just in that area there. And to sort of see that was the first time it really hit home that you're playing to an empty stadium, as it were, and the cost it must be for the race courses and the amount of revenue they're losing. It is obviously a worrying time for the sport through that. So that's what really hits you, that there's people involved in the race courses that you never see. From a jockey's point of view, I go into the weighing room, onto the course and back in again, but there's people's livelihoods, whether it's on-course bookmakers or people that run the restaurants at the race courses, or people that work in the hospitality parts. And I know it's the case for lots of people all up and down the country, but that's the people I always feel for when I see the empty race courses. You're not really, I'm not really, although I can get carried away after I've had a winner, I'm not really trying to play to the crowd. I don't really get a buzz off it. So the fact that there's nobody there, it doesn't really affect anything else. It just makes it a little bit easier probably to go home. From the racecourse's point of view, you want for racing survival, you've got to try and get as many people back on the track as we can.
That's interesting. You were saying about from a jockey's perspective, it doesn't make too much difference. As I said, I tend to be on the flat, and I had a Zoom for my owners during Royal Ascot. And I did a tipping competition. I was being asked, obviously, Frankie Dettori, who does like playing to the gallery a bit, certainly after he's had Group 1 winners. And one of the questions I was being asked was, how would Frankie fare? And I said, well, I'm not so sure, really, because he loves, big crowds there. Did it make any difference? Did it? Heck, he rode 6 Royal Ascot winners and still did his flying dismount. So that's interesting. Flat or jumps, obviously, you're in the zone at the time and ride just as you would normally if there were 60, 70, 80,000 people there. So that's interesting, Tom. Talking about you're riding in front of people or not, you have been nominated when you were riding in front of a load of people a year ago for the Leicesters for your Jumps Ride of the Year on Capage. Now, for people who don't know, the Leicesters are the Oscars of the horse racing world. It's too late to really give it a big plug for people to vote because voting is already closed, but it's on the 22nd of December. And it's an interesting race, Capage. It wasn't like it was a Gold Cup or a Grand National or anything like that. It was a novice hurdle at Leicester about a year ago today almost. And the commentator actually said, quote, "How on earth has Tom Scudamore stayed on?" The horse sort of ballooned the first, and I winced when I looked at the replays on the second flight of hurdles. I know that you have 2 daughters. I think it's Margot and Myrtle. Well, I was bringing tears to my eyes, and I thought, I can't see that Tom Scudamore's ever going to sire a 3rd child after that.
Well, I'm sat next to my just opposite my pregnant missus at the moment, so it's the Capage landing on Capage has maybe woken a few of the old swimmers up. So maybe he hasn't done any damage, but yeah, it was quite interesting.
Did he surprise you though? Did he surprise you? He obviously lacked confidence that day.
Yeah, he did, because he'd scored really well at home. Although he'd fallen in a point-to-point, he'd run over obstacles before. Maybe he must have scared himself when he fell in his point-to-point, but he'd been a natural at home. So that's what surprised me the most, is that you got to be expecting anything, but I wasn't expecting that. But I knew he had a very, very good engine, and it was just a case of trying to hold on. He was always going to win. It was just maybe not in the manner that we thought he would do.
But he's clearly a horse with an engine and a horse to follow. I think David Pite put him in his Racing Post Stable Tour as one to follow, and actually commented that because the horse went off at 9-2 on, which for those of you know, you've got to put £90 on to win 20 quid. I think David said he actually did his utmost not to win the race, but obviously thanks to your jockeyship, he did win the race. So well done, and we really wish you well with that award. Hope you.
Yes, I think I'm odds on to win it as well because what you talk about my daughters, and I think they've got all their friends to vote too. So hopefully, all the people that promised them they were going to vote have voted. In which case, we're in with a fighting chance.
Excellent. Bit like the racing industry rallying around getting AP McCoy to be BBC Sports Personality of the Year. So that good stuff, and I hope you get it. Now, talking about horses to follow, can you give us any horses maybe at the Kempton meeting in December or at Cheltenham? Some horses that you're really looking forward to riding for our listeners?
Well, it's a little bit all up in the air, especially this is the Christmas period, because I'm not exactly sure where I'll be going Boxing Day. I, at the moment, probably Kempton, but I've got to wait for one or two things to find out. Look, the one who will hopefully be making, although he's he's not exactly a dark horse, Thistlecrack, I think, is all primed to run in the long walk at Ascot. So I'm looking forward to getting back on him again. Of the horses over the Christmas period as well, a young horse to follow who probably has a bit to learn about racing still yet, but I think will make up into a very good horse. A horse called Bumpy Johnson. He's got engagements at Fosslas on Monday. He didn't jump very well around Hereford. Again, it schooled very well at home, but he's a horse with lots of ability. He's a little bit quirky, but I think he's got a big future ahead of him. So he's certainly one to follow. And another horse, is a horse called Maggie's Mogul. I think she'll make up into a very nice novice hurdler. She was third or fourth around Fosslas in her one bumper so far, but she's improved an awful lot for that. She'll come on for the run, and we're hoping the big things of her. And I'll be interested to see her ride a horse tomorrow called Make Me a Believer. So whether by the time this podcast goes off, I'll either be have lots of egg on my face or look really intelligent. So I think win, lose or draw tomorrow. He's another horse with a very big future. So got plenty to look forward to. But those would be the three that spring to mind at the moment.
Okay, well, you're certainly riding in good form and riding some big winners recently. I know you're only aged 38, but in jockey terms, that's considered one of the senior jockeys sort of the weighing room. But what does the future hold for you beyond race riding, Tom? Because not all jockeys go into training, but you've done a bit of media work, haven't you? And I know that you were very prominent on the BHA equine welfare videos. So have you given any thoughts to further down the line as to what you might do later on in racing?
Yeah, you've got to. You've got to think about unfortunately how much you want to be like Peter Pan. That at some point that age is going to catch up with you. So I have given it a thought of what I'd like to do in the future. I'd like to obviously stay involved in racing. I don't want to train racehorses, but I'd love to be involved in racing. And actually, I think if I was to stay in racing, I'd like to stay in and do maybe something slightly different in it, whether it's down the flat route or be involved in bloodstock. That's the sort of route I'm looking for at the moment. Obviously, National Hunt is in my blood and is my passion, but I'd like to maybe do something slightly different, but staying within racing.
Well, listen, it's really lovely talking to you, Tom. I know you have incredibly long days, as you've already explained to both Phil and myself. But wish you the best of luck at the Christmas meeting, the Cheltenham Festival, and the rest of the season. Thanks very much, Tom, for joining us on Inside the Race.
Absolute pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you very much for asking me.
Well, Phil, what a lovely guy Tom Scudamore is. I've never met him, but I can see really why you like employing him to ride for your syndicates for BG Racing. Lovely chap. Now we come to this part of the programme where I hand over to you to encourage our listeners about subscribing and rating and reviewing. Over to you, Phil.
Yeah, we've had some great feedback from the first podcast, and I'd like to thank everyone that's taken the time to leave us a rating or a review on their chosen podcast platform. But if you haven't done that yet, it would really help us to grow our listenership, which will enable us to get on some more interesting guests as we go forward. So we're planning another episode next month, and we hope to get a trainer or another person from the racing industry on there for us to interview again. And in the meantime, as I say, anything that people can do in terms of sharing our podcast on social media and giving us those subscriptions and likes and things like that, that would be great, because that'll all help us to grow and move forward.